exactly they are doing, people fear that they're mining essentially them and putting explosives there.
Stop the war in Ukraine! Stop the war in Ukraine! Stop the war!
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. 3 striking videos to start off the program today. The first is of hundreds of unarmed people in Ukraine on the main road to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power complex, trying to stop Russian forces from seizing it. On Democracy Now!, a Ukrainian economics professor said this about the closed Chernobyl nuclear plant.
Yes, it is true that there are reports that Russia troops moved towards to secure, quote unquote, nuclear facilities. But now we have heard of reports of Chernobyl, which is not operational; it's just the site of the nuclear disaster, and then you have the largest station in Europe, Zaporizhzhia. Overall, there are 15 reactors in Ukraine, and they operate in in very different cities. There is a real kind of problematic evidence about Chernobyl. There are sensors which are monitored internationally, and a couple of days ago they spiked up about 1,000 times and then returned to normal. Faculty at MIT, people who work on nuclear security and non-proliferation, they have written a report, and it's been sent to me privately because the Kyiv School of Economics is involved in providing analytics to the government. And in this report, it says that the only possible explanation to this specific pattern of radiation increase and then reduction and return to normal is that the facilities where the storage of the nuclear waste and the areas where there was the Chernobyl explosion and there is coverage over it have been quickly opened and closed. And the only rationale, or the running rationale, why it was done to open the close in order to maybe mine it or secure it in some other ways. So we see that there are other symptoms. The Russians are securing nuclear stations, and as on Chernobyl, we see that there are leakages of radiation. So they're not just securing; they are doing something there. What exactly they are doing? People fear that they're mining essentially them and putting explosives there or in some areas. That's what analysts from the MIT is suggesting. I hope it's not true, but every time I made an assumption what should be true and what should be rational for Putin to do, I was wrong.
Did you get that? He said they were mining. I guess that means they were stealing anything they could that was worthwhile. Worse than that, he thought they could be planting explosives. What possible reason for that? The ultimate in blackmail? If the Russian forces are losing, they threaten to radiate all of Ukraine unless their bidding is done? Sounds absolutely crazy, but as the professor said, whenever he thinks something is way crazy extreme, it seems to happen. That was on Democracy Now! On the morning of March 3rd. On the evening, news broke that there was a battle in front of that Zaporizhzhia nuclear power complex, and one building was on fire. The bigger nuclear question, of course, is nuclear weapons. Russia has even more nuclear weapons in its arsenal than does the United States. We need to give Ukraine support, but above all, we must not have a nuclear war. It would mean the deaths of billions and probably the end of human civilization. We absolutely must not have direct military confrontation between U.S. and Russian forces because it probably could not be controlled. For more on this, listen to Gilbert Achcar later in the program. This woman holds up two signs, one about the dangers of nuclear war, and because of this crime, she's arrested. Reports are that some 8,000 Russians have been arrested for going to rallies or simply holding up a sign saying the words, "No war." Speaking of rallies, PEP, Socialist Resurgence, Unidad Latinas en Acción, and others will be holding a rally Sunday morning, March 6th at 11:30 a.m. in New Haven. It should be a model for how the left should deal with the question of what to do when a foreign empire attacks a weaker country. In Hartford, Connecticut, on February 27th, a large crowd, maybe over 700 people, came to the Capitol, Ukrainian-Americans and their supporters, and protested the invasion.
Polish, Lithuanian, Hungarian friends, Ukraine needs your help today. We have to fight the enemy. We are fighting for democracy, not only for Ukraine, but for the global democracy, because evil has to be defeated. Thank you. We will gonna sing the Ukrainian anthem now. Thank you.
Many of you are immigrants from Ukraine. Many of you are born here in the United States to parents of Ukrainian descent. And many of you are born here in the United States and have been here in the U.S. your whole life. We all have a special place in our hearts for the people of Ukraine. The people who today, as you all know, are suffering and being tested. But we all know that Ukrainians are very resilient, and they will survive, and we will survive, and we will move forward. Right now we come together as the Ukrainian American community not just here in Connecticut, but all over the United States, all over the world. And we pray for our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. We pray for the children of Ukraine. We pray for everybody in the world, because this menace will not stop unless he is stopped.
My name is Paul Nenordis. I'm the president of the Lithuanian community of Connecticut. Today is a most solemn day for us in solidarity with all Ukrainians here around the world and in America, and all of you here today. This is a special day for us. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Special day to be here in respect for only 1 week ago, last Sunday, right down the road here at our church hall, your Ukrainian representative gave a very beautiful talk dressed in his traditional Ukrainian folk costume and dress, and what a difference only 1 week makes. And I've thought about his words all week long, and especially since Wednesday and Thursday. And Kurzai, are you here? I'll find him. So just God bless Ukrainians, as was already spoken. So important for the entire international community to stop Putin's aggression. We've seen what he can do in the past, and we need to stop him today. God bless you all, and long live Ukraine.
I am very privileged to be here on behalf of the Greater Hartford Jewish community. And I just want you to know that we stand with Ukraine. The entire Jewish community stands with Ukraine here locally and throughout the world. And I'd like to take a minute, as I look at all these beautiful yellow and blue flags, to share my Ukrainian journey. I'm a Jewish man that fell in love with Natalie Koshenyuk, a first American Ukrainian woman, the daughter of Theodore and Olga Koshenyuk, who fought in the underground during World War II, being chased by the Nazis and the Russians, and lived in the woods in order to find and to create a free and independent Ukraine. They came here and had my beautiful wife, Natalie. We have a beautiful daughter, Talia, and we were unable to have a second child, and Natalie said, we are going to find a child of Ukrainian descent and bring them to the United States. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you.
I would like to mention now that many people are asking about the humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. There are many different organizations. I can mention one, which is the United Ukrainian-American Relief Committee, which was formed in 1944 in the United States. Since 1944, they have helped many immigrants to this country. I mentioned the Ukrainian National Home of Hartford. They've been here in Hartford since 1965 on Wethersfield Avenue, prior to that, since 1935 in other buildings in Hartford. The Ukrainian community in Connecticut is a vibrant community made up of Ukrainian Americans, made up of immigrants from Ukraine. And today, like 8 years ago, when they initially invaded Crimea and then invaded Luhansk and Donetsk, we stand as one.
I'm a first-generation Ukrainian-American. My parents, their parents were born in Ukraine. To me, I never thought in my life that I'd have my little daughter here protesting the way I protested in the 70s and 80s as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old. I never thought this would happen again. Putin wants Ukraine. Why? We don't know. We do know, actually. He wants the Soviet Union again. But guess what? Ukrainians in Ukraine who are fighting by themselves aren't going to let this happen. They will fight to the very end. We need to pray for everyone that's fighting in Ukraine. The elderly woman that is holding a machine gun in her hands, the elderly woman that told the Russian soldier, here's some sunflower seeds, because when you die on our land, those sunflowers will grow from you. The 13 soldiers that fought off on Snake Island and told Putin, do you know what? To go, you know what yourself, and I'm not going to say it. To all those soldiers, to the women, the children, there shouldn't be newborn babies in the subways that are 3 days old living there.
Towards the end of the program, a Russian-American woman spoke.
Forgiveness. I'm asking forgiveness for all the atrocities that the Russians are doing on the land of Ukraine. I call on to all Russians everywhere. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Don't be afraid. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Русские, не бойтесь. Выходите на улицы. Мы должны это остановить. Слава Украине! Thank you.
After the event, I spoke to her and the MC of the event, Myron Kolinsky.
Elena, I thought it was so important that you were here. You identified yourself as Russian. Were you born in Russia?
Yes.
What part?
Urals. The Urals, that's the Ural Mountains. Yes.
I see. Do you understand Ukrainian?
I'm trying to. I have many Ukrainian friends. I understand a little bit, but I'm really trying.
I understand a lot of Russians came out yesterday in protest and many were arrested. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, of course I've heard.
What have you heard?
We are watching protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and we see people coming out and we see people being arrested. And I pray to God that more people will come out and more people will protest. It's going to take a lot more people to stop this war.
Myron, what is the latest? Is there internet? Can people phone into Ukraine?
Some of my friends were having issues earlier this week, but from what I've heard, people have been able to get through in western Ukraine. I'm not sure about eastern Ukraine.
So far we have not heard any big cities fallen to the Russians. Do you know anything new about that?
Well, we know that they were advancing towards Kyiv, but it appears that they've been pushed back, as far as we heard. And obviously there's skirmishes happening, but the people are very resilient. The people are protecting their own land, their own families, and I think that's very important. And the fact that Ukraine, a lot of World War II was fought on Ukrainian lands, and people today they're protecting their lands.
We've seen reports that a lot of Russians have tried to protest. There's been many arrests of Russians. Are you encouraged by the Russians who are opposed to Putin and the war?
Absolutely. You know, these people have the right, just like in Ukraine. They have the right. They have the right to have the freedom and democracy that Ukraine has today, and that's what I think is it's very encouraging. It's very encouraging.
Earlier in the week, I interviewed a very well-known socialist professor who lives in Britain. His name is Gilbert Achcar. I asked him about the idea of a no-fly zone and of delivering weapons to Ukraine.
I can understand Ukrainians, especially those who are under the bombs, much more than those who are abroad or in the United States. I understand those who are under the bombs if they ask for such measures. But it's obviously completely irresponsible. We're speaking, I mean, if you say no-fly zone, the only way for Western countries or NATO or the United States to try to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be to clash with the Russian Air Force. And you can imagine what that means. That means World War III. And with a Russia that has already, in a very irresponsible manner, declared the nuclear alert, as happened 2 days ago, this is really not only playing with fire, but playing with a very big fire. I mean, the future of humanity would be at stake here, the survival of humanity. So that doesn't make sense. These such demands are not serious. Anyway, I'm not seeing. I don't think there is any possibility, and not the slightest possibility, that the United States or NATO country would take such a measure. Not against Russia. They can do that against I don't know, the Libyan Air Force or such countries, or the Iraqi Air Force in Kurdistan. But definitely they won't try it with Russia.
On the other hand, you do support the right of Ukraine to get weapons from U.S., NATO, etc.
Look, when a weaker country is invaded by a much powerful one, it is normal to support the delivery of weapons to those fighting, resisting the subjugation of their country. Take an example. During the Vietnam War, we were not asking Moscow and Beijing to intervene militarily against American troops because, like for the no-fly zone, that would have meant a world war, right? But we were definitely 100%, 1,000% in favor of delivery of weapons to the Vietnamese resistance. And I would say that it's normal for when there is, I mean, when people are fighting a just war for the liberation or against the invasion of their country, it's normal to that they get what they need to fight. Defensive weapons, of course, it's a matter of getting the defensive weapons they need. This is a much more rational and I would say legitimate demand or request than a no-fly zone, which doesn't make sense.
Well, what would you say to those who say, you're saying this is like 1967, comparing it to Vietnam, but really we should be comparing this to 1914, with all sides being wrong, the entire war being useless and horrible, and that that the left should take the position of what was it? Defeatism, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wrong interpretation of the position in 1914. The position was about the war between imperialist states, not the war between one imperialist state and a non-imperialist state, weaker, which becomes an oppressed state. So when you have a clash between Germany and Russia, as you had 1914, or Germany and France, you may say, I'm fully against this war on both sides, okay, no to the war, and even if you take it to a radical extreme, I don't mind if my country is defeated, right? Now, you can't apply this reasoning on a weaker country, which is not an imperialist country, which is not invading any other country, being invaded by a major imperial force.
You can watch the whole interview by going to The Struggle and clicking on our link to our YouTubes. And this woman on a Russian subway or bus, obviously deliberately wearing the Ukrainian colors. At last look, it had 180,000 shares. Coming up on March 13th, a forum on the Ukrainian war featuring a Ukrainian and Russian activist. For more information about it, go to rpm.world. Last week we showed rallies in Connecticut protesting the trip of the governor of Connecticut to Israel to drum up business from the apartheid state. The corporate media did not cover the rallies at all. Finally, the Connecticut Mirror published this article by Shelley Altman, a leader of Jewish Voice for Peace. We link to it on The Struggle. If you recall, last year the Connecticut House and Senate passed a bill that would have ended the cruel practice of solitary confinement. But the governor of Connecticut, Mr. Lamont, vetoed it. Instead, he put in an executive order making some limits on what was going on. That's not good enough, according to activists. And Robin Porter, the representative from New Haven, said, I have a real issue with us thinking that, 15 days in solitary confinement, 2 hours a day out of a cell does not constitute isolation. So there'll be another effort to get a bill passed to end the practice of solitary confinement. We'll come back to the issue. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.